Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Success and Leadership Breakfast. Great to see so many of you out here this morning. My name is Mark Beyer. I'm the editor of Business News, and I'll be your MC this morning. We start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. I'd also like to welcome our special guest today, Programmed Managing Director Chris Sutherland. Could you please join me in welcoming Chris? I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to our Success and Leadership series host sponsor, Commonwealth Bank of Australia, and to our series sponsors, Brian Burke Homes, City of Perth, EY, the Harry Perkins Institute of Medical Research, Meerkats, Velrada, WA Super, and thanks as well to the Hyatt Regency for supporting this event. Please join me in thanking our sponsors who make this possible. We always have a lot happening at Business News, and I'd like to briefly share a few highlights with you this morning. In February, we had our first Success and Leadership breakfast for the year with Premier Mark McGowan. We're now getting ready for our annual Rising Stars Awards. These awards acknowledge fast-growing businesses, from startups and family companies through to listed companies. If you're part of a fast-growing organisation or business, and that's pretty special in this market, we'd love to hear from you. You can get all the details at the awards website, details on your program, rising-stars.com.au. We've been running these awards for 14 years. There's a great collection of past winners, but nominations for this year close next Friday. We'd love to hear from you and look forward to seeing some of you at the cocktail function in June, where we'll announce the winners. Now, this year, it's a very special one for Business News because we're celebrating 25 years in business. And we've seen enormous change over that time, both inside our business and in the Western Australian economy and business sector. Lots of strategic shifts, lots of technology changes, and we've ridden all of those changes, and we're still here, as you can see, and writing analysis, compiling data, hosting events about business in WA. Throughout the year, we'll be looking back at some of the defining events that have marked Western Australia's development over 25 years, and we'll be reaching out to other organisations that are also sharing big milestones this year. And we're planning a special supplement later this year and an event to mark the occasion, and so we're reaching out to other organisations to share in that with us. If you'd like to see a list of the guests that are in attendance this morning, browse to the URL that can be found on the back of your program. Now, if you have a question for Chris Sutherland, there are several ways you can ask it. You're welcome to tweet to #BNSuccess. You can text your questions and they'll pop up on the screen at the front here. And of course, we'll have a roving microphone later this morning so you can stand up and ask questions. Breakfast will be served shortly, at which time business cards will be collected for today's door prizes. The Hyatt has donated one night's accommodation in a Hyatt Regency Club King Room plus breakfast for two. If you enter the competition in about a week, you'll be invited to participate in a 2-minute feedback survey. We really appreciate your feedback on these events. I'll be back just before 8 o'clock and we'll wrap up just before 9 o'clock. Please enjoy your breakfast. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed your breakfast. I'd like once again to thank our host sponsor, Commonwealth Bank, and all of our series sponsors. Now, today's event will be a Q&A format, and leading the discussion will be Business News Chief Executive Mark Pownall. And Mark recently clocked up 18 years with Business News, so please welcome him to the stage. It's now my pleasure to introduce our special guest, Chris Sutherland. I did some, like a lot of people, started with Wikipedia doing my research. Discovered Chris Sutherland was the lead programmer for the first 2 Donkey Kong games. Thought, no, that's another one. Our Chris was born in Bunbury, grew up in Vic Park. He and his twin brother Greg finished their schooling at Trinity College, where they were amongst the top students in the state. Chris went on to study engineering, worked at a number of prominent businesses, including Clough and Worley Parsons. He was appointed Managing Director of Programmed in January 2008, after its merger with Integrated Group the year earlier. So he's just gone over 10 years as Managing Director, another milestone. Chris went back to Trinity College. He served as Chairman of the board there. He's also Chair of a Perth-based group, CEOs for Gender Equity. So a lot of areas to cover, and please welcome Chris to the stage.
Welcome, Chris. Look, just to quickly set the agenda, we've got about 35, 40 minutes of discussion, and we'll have 10 minutes for questions from the floor. Yes, you can, we've got some screens here so we can see the questions that come through, and sometimes I borrow them and use them up, sometimes I refer directly to them, and of course we welcome you to grab the microphone at some stage, and I know it's always harder the bigger the crowd, but we always like people to do the face-to-face questions as well. Chris, Mark mentioned your schooling and your links to Trinity College there, and I know that yourself and your twin Greg were leading academics at the school, and I couldn't remember which one of you was Ducks and whether it was you or Greg. So what was the story there?
So you've been talking to you already, has he?
Yeah.
Well, actually, Greg was actually Ducks, and I think I went through my whole school life, actually. Normally, he was always given number one position, and therefore I'd have to be number two position. Suffered greatly on it. But unfortunately, it's still under dispute because in the Year 12 exams, I did beat him in the Year 12 exams with a higher score. But unfortunately, they already picked Ducks before the scores come out. But I believe that's a flaw in the system. It's still going through the courts at the moment.
Yeah, right. So you didn't use your authority as chairman of the board to scrub that out and retrospectively change it?
I did try, but it wasn't allowed.
And I'm intrigued, as a twin, going through school and university, because I think you both did engineering too, although maybe in different fields. Is that an advantage? Is there a natural competitiveness or?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, there certainly was competition between both of us, and a bit like probably in a lot of siblings and families as well. But I think being an identical twin, you do tend to kind of maybe, it gets a bit more competitive. But at the same time, we always saw it as an advantage, and we often would share assignments, kind of share the load, do half the work, if you like, between us. Mm-hmm. We had gone to
Can't
different...
do that these days.
That's right. We had, done swap classes and different things if one couldn't make it and stuff like that, like any good identical twin would do to help their other one. And it's been good because, as some people might know, I've got identical twin daughters myself, and I think they've kind of had a bit of a shared experience actually. Yeah, right. On a similar basis. Yeah.
You can relate to what they're going through. And you chose engineering. Was that just a natural fit, or was it?
I think like anyone, almost. I think when you finish school, you really don't know what you want to do, and also I think that even if you kind of do, you don't really know what that really involves. And I mean, I was attracted to, I guess, maths and the sciences and some things like that, and I saw engineering was a good place to start, if you like. So I chose engineering and have never looked back. I mean, I do remember one little incident at the end of Year 10. I think it was actually Channel 7 that sent someone to the school to talk about a career as a cameraman. They were offering a cadetship, right? And I went home and said, Mum, I really want to do this. I want to finish at Year 10. I want to do that. And lucky for me, she said no.
No career. You could have been someone very different. And is there something about engineering? Just remind me, what field of engineering?
So I did civil engineering,
yeah,
which is the better kind.
What about engineering do you think provides value with what you do today?
Look, I think really the core of engineering is just solving problems. I mean, it teaches you how to, look at everything that's around you, the environment, data, all sorts of things that's going on, and just to solve that problem, often using maybe some mathematical thinking and so on. But it's not actually the skill of understanding, a mathematical formula or something. It's actually just the ability to think through and solve a problem, right? And for me, that's a life skill, right? And that's why one of my kind of pet subjects is around the benefit of maths to teach people how to solve problems, and in fact, I think solve problems to have a better life.
Okay. And can you think of anywhere where, in that, can you transfer that skill to others if they haven't come from that science background?
No, I do think that people who have done a reasonable level of maths when they finish school, I think have set themselves up for, on average, I wouldn't say it's for all people, on average, more success in some of the things they do, because I think they've got some stronger ability just to problem solve and analyse. And when we hire an apprentice painter or electrician, right, I would say that the kid that's actually done better at maths, right, between the two of them, 5 years later, what are they doing? They're involved in estimating work, managing budgets, maybe a bit of project management, all jobs within program that will earn a higher income than necessarily, staying on the award as a painter or electrician.
Now, when you started your working life, you started at Clough.
Yes.
Can you tell us about how you ended up there?
Yeah, so Clough, under Harold Clough, just an amazing company, and he was an amazing person. So he's probably almost the first kind of business person that I got to know, and was certainly a mentor. They were running a scholarship. They'd been running a scholarship since the early 70s at UWA. I applied for one and was very happy to get one where they effectively just gave you $5,000 and there was no ties. But what they did at the end was just offer you a job. So I didn't even have a resume, but they offered me a job and I just started because I had that Clough scholarship, and they had some knowledge of me, and I'd worked like a summer vacation
Right.
with them. So that was a great start. When I joined, I worked under people like Sue Murphy, who's still a fantastic mentor and friend, and some other great people there. So yeah, really fantastic. And the one thing I'd say about Clough back then was that with Harold, he wasn't afraid of failure. So I always remember him saying, "Right, Chris, I want you to do that." And I go, "Look, I've never even done that before. I'm only 2 years old." And he go, "Oh well, there's only one way to learn, Chris, and just push you out the front, and you get on with it, and that's how you learn." And I thought it was a fantastic, experience.
Yeah, and look, and how long you worked there for a long? Actually, I think I recall something, how you ended up doing what you're doing at Clough on day one. I think there was a...
Sorry, so there's 4 graduates from UWA that started there, and the very first day we go there, and we're sitting outside who was effectively this COO's office, Albert Scott, and they called us in alphabetical order. So, and luckily I was Sutherland, and there was Adam Steinberg was the guy before me, who's now runs Allied, the Space Invader firm.
Yep.
That's it. But they went through one person. He had to go to Krathus straight away. The next person had to go to Indonesia. The next person was not sure where he was going. I think Geraldton, actually, right? And then it came me, and they said, "You need to go to Harold's office." And I went, "Oh, okay." So I went around to Harold's office, and my very first job was actually Harold drove me down to the Coombe, where he's got all the houses built down there, and it's just a big bush block, huge cliff face, and I had to design that cliff face and that retaining wall that's still there today. So, that's one of the monuments, if you like, that I designed that still exists, and I'm very proud of, and particularly, if you're going past on a boat.
You can't miss it.
Can't miss it.
Can't miss it.
But, again, I said to Harold, "Harold, I know I'm a civil engineer, right, but I've never done this." He goes, "Oh, we're just going to figure it out." So, yeah, we figured it out, and he built it.
And so you ended up working closely with Harold from the beginning,
Yeah,
right?
no, absolutely. So I think I was very lucky because, the other graduates all left Perth literally on planes the next day to different remote sites and so on, and whereas I spent my first 6 months actually working with Harold.
Yeah.
So it was fantastic.
And you mentioned already that he didn't mind, taking a risk. So, just a little bit more of what you learnt from that period.
Well, I think what I learned out of that, and I do definitely apply it in business today, is that one shouldn't be frightened of making a mistake. I mean, what you should be more concerned about is not learning from a mistake. So and I think that goes to kind of life as well. I mean, if you want to grow in business, you definitely have to take some risks, right? I mean, I think you can try to minimise and control risks, right? But at some point, you do have to take those risks. And I think that you've got to, accept the idea that, it's not really making a mistake is different to failing. I've never seen when something hasn't worked out as failing. I've always just seen, okay, didn't quite get that right. Let's learn from that and let's move on and give it another go.
And can you remember any mistakes or made at Clough that, you kind of go, gee, I learned a lot from that?
Not any that I'm prepared to talk about.
No.
Oh, no, I think, we're building a jetty down at what was Ocean Shipyards down there at Kwinana, right? And we were prefabbing all the concrete there and that. And I remember that we set up the precast site, and the first concrete pour we did, right? We had to do a test after 24 hours, and it failed. And I think I made a bit of a mistake there, but
right.
I don't even know anyone at Clough knew that. We just threw that out and started again.
Yeah. They didn't get down there often enough to know.
The good thing about concrete, you can kind of make it 3 times as strong as it needs to be. So.
Right, okay. And obviously you're at Clough for a long time. You ended up, what was your sort of position at the end?
Well, I went through various project roles, project manager, and in fact my last position was kind of head of strategy there actually, and I'd already kind of moved into looking at, this is before the business had actually floated, right, about what options were, and involved in some discussions with some of the larger global firms about maybe there's a place for Clough in an arrangement like that rather than listing. So the family were looking at trade, sale, listing options, and I was involved in that. I was also involved in trying to establish what was then a maintenance service arm rather than just construction. Construction can be up and down, and we at the time we bought a 25% interest in Mermaid Marine, so I was actually sat on the board of Mermaid Marine in the very early days there.
Which is now MMA offshore.
Yep, that's right. Yep. That's right. We bought some other what we kind of consider service business to try to create some different earning streams, and I guess that was my first, I'll say, more direct exposure to, I guess the maintenance and asset management side that I'm kind of running now.
You've ended up in.
Yeah.
So obviously you did end up in that. So what you left Clough?
I left Clough and joined Worley Parsons, and I guess it was just a different opportunity, and I was running then all the asset services for Worley Parsons, which was the all the alliances like the Transfer Worley Alliance that they had with Woodside. They had one with Alcoa and people like that. So I was the Worley representative in that relationship with Transfield, direct report to John Grill, and I was actually only there for a couple of years. I could have been there still now, except for the fact that an opportunity came to run Integrated, which was a public company. I think they had bought a marine business called Total Marine, probably weren't too sure why or what they wanted to do with it, and I guess I was recognised I'd done a hell of a lot of oil and gas work when I was at Clough. We didn't get to that, but yeah, I'd done a lot of oil and gas work, so I knew a lot about that side of the industry, and I guess that was the real kind of probably quite a risk in a sense, you might say. I didn't necessarily see it like that. I remember a number of people rang me up and told me I was crazy.
Yeah, right.
But I'd felt that that was a stretch opportunity and something I could try to make my own.
Yeah.
That was 2006, and really that's the start of this journey.
And the listed environment was that what people were warning you about, or was it just that you were leaving the big safe?
I think not so much the listed, but small company. Its balance sheet wasn't great. Some challenging issues. They'd just announced a loss. The founder was stepping down.
Yeah, right. So you took over.
Yep.
And what was attractive in it then, and why?
Well,
What did you first
for me, what was attractive was I had an opportunity to develop my own kind of strategy, business plan, and test myself to see if I can make it work, right? So that's why I did it. You know, almost on day one, I always remember when my current CFO, he's in the room here at the moment, Stephen Leach. He was a group financial controller and just stepped up to be effectively the CFO of Integrated because they'd sacked the previous CFO for a whole bunch of problems that were going on. And Steve had he had an honest conversation with me and scared the living daylights of me when he really told me all the things that had gone wrong, and I just accepted this job. But I think that the honesty in that conversation was something I really enjoyed, and I've kept Stephen by my side ever since. And I think that's another element of, if you like, building a successful business has to be is making sure you've got the right people around you, but at the same time making them develop and grow.
And may I ask, obviously when you take over, running a business at that situation, you've got your chance to get a strategy, and I presume you come in with a few thoughts, but you've still got to formulate that. But you're still fighting some fires that are already exist, right?
That's right. So I mean, at that time, and we spent the first 3 months like real serious firefighting to survive the business to survive. So in the first 3 months, we had these vessels that weren't really working. So we sold them to Jeff Webber at Mermaid Marine. Always remember, a year before, Integrated had bought the business with the vessels for $20 million. $23 million. We sold the vessels alone for $20 million, and we kept the ability to just provide the manning, catering, operational services to vessel owners. The interesting thing is 5 years later, I mean, we made $25 million out of that manning business without even owning the boats.
Right. Okay.
Do
you remind Jeff of that?
Well, he had a good run as well, but it's quite tough for vessel owners out there at the moment. And that was, I mean, again, it's no accident that we sold the boats in a strategic sense, because right then I decided that you can only be good at a few things in your business, and we want to be very good at hiring people, training people, developing people, putting the right people in the right jobs every day, managing a workforce, those sorts of things. And so that's why we sold the boats, and when I ended up taking over program, we sold the waste management business, which was Barry Brothers. I had to Tox Free. I think I've created a lot of WA companies. Yeah, right. But again, the idea is that we didn't see ourselves as an asset owner. It takes a lot more capital, and also you've got to carry that utilisation risk. And a lot of these positions, you have to be, far more global in your outlook. If you're going to run vessels, I think it's very hard to be just a Perth-based operator. I mean, it's a global market. A competitor can sail a vessel from Singapore overnight and be in your market. So I think you've got to be a global player.
So just talk us through Integrated to Programmed and...
So interesting times, I guess. So, I'd only been at Integrated a year. In fact, it was a matter of weeks after I joined that program came knocking the door, and they wanted to make an offer, and we kind of pushed them away a bit. But 12 months later, we announced that, program are acquiring Integrated for about $261 million, I think. I think the Integrated shareholders saw that as a good deal. I did believe that program getting into the staffing side of things actually was an interesting thing, and something that I actually supported the strategy. But largely as Integrated director, it was the right share price you accept. 6 months later, the boards decided that the then managing director, who'd been running the company for 18 years, it may be due to refresh and renew. I don't think the businesses hadn't really combined that well at that point. So I agreed to participate in the process, and out the other end, a few months later, I'm appointed to run program. And what was interesting for me is that then, as running program, I'm running a business now that had $235 million in net debt, gearing of 91%, all created by buying Integrated. Yeah. I thought it was a good deal when I was selling shares in Integrated. Now I'm running Program, and I go, oh, okay. maybe there should have been a bit more equity there. But you know, and again, that was an interesting time because I accepted the job in November 07.
Right, okay.
Went on an 8-week holiday to the US, right, to refresh. Read every day in the US what was happening in the credit markets over there, and the GFC was sort of coming. And by the time I come back, you know, we're a March year end. I started in January 08, right, and I'm looking at a balance sheet and a whole bunch of banking relationships who are starting to see things differently to maybe how the world was seen a year before. And again, we had to move very quickly, and you know, that was when we sold Barry Brothers, the waste management business program had, to Tox Free for $25 million. I always remember walking down St George's Terrace with Stephen, my CFO, to the branch, just up on St George's Terrace there. We'd got a cheque and we needed it cashed in the bank June 30, such that the cash cleared. So we'd just about meet our covenant basically on you know, that's the kind of how often things work. Yep. Now, we were kind of safer than that. I mean, it sounds more dramatic, but largely, you know, I think with the way we saw the GFC rolling out, the board and ourselves, we decided that we needed to be ahead of any curve. We didn't know where that was going to end. We knew credit could dry up. So, you know, we quickly put a plan, and we literally, you know, we paid down debt, you know, over $100 million in the next kind of 3 years, and just focused on maximising cash flow, and that really then set the business up. Because you know, it'd be fair to say I felt Skilled, they leveraged themselves again and again, and I think that you know.
So you think that was one of the big differences between the businesses?
Well, I think that by the time we got to looking at Skilled, you know, we had no debt, zero debt, and they, you know, they had quite a bit of debt.
Who was on your board that was kind of helping you with that thinking?
There's been some good people along the way. I mean, I think, you know, the last board, if you like, as a listed entity, most definitely Bruce Brook, who was our chairman. You know, and Bruce has got executive basis, a kind of finance mining background. But, you know, he's on the board of, you know, the CSL and Newmont in America, Gold, and so on. And no, he was very good. But, you know, I think, you know, I've always seen strategic thinking as fundamental to, you know, being an effective manager of a business.
Yep.
And I know the board would agree with us that I've always been reluctant to kind of hire like a consulting firm to kind of do all the thinking for you. I always find that, you know, they kind of say, well, we've done all the thinking and here's what you should do. I mean, there's no sense of ownership by the management in it. I think it's, you know, potentially, even though it's a good idea, it probably still won't work. Whereas, you know, we did our own strategic thinking about, you know, the steps we need to take, and largely when we're looking at Skilled, and you know, I'd probably spoken to them for about 4 years prior, through 3 CEOs of that organisation. You know, what was interesting was that I always had a great belief that, you know, in our business, scale does ultimately become important. You know, we obviously achieved that kind of scale in our staffing side through the acquisition of that business, and I think it's fundamentally it's part of the reasons why you know, one of the great, you know, people staffing service company in the world, really, Purcell in Japan, you know, then were interested in us. I think if we hadn't have bought Skilled, and we're both kind of 2 medium-sized businesses, I think it wouldn't
have been on their radar.
Yeah, I don't think so.
So look, just go straight to that. How did that happen?
Yeah, look, again, as an organisation, we're not out looking for these things. Often people talk to you about different ideas, and I go, well, we're a public company, anyone can buy our shares, right? But largely, you know, an approach is made where they're interested in understanding your business, and we said there's no harm in that. So we engaged in and having some of the senior executives from Purcell involved in understanding our business. We made it, I think, very clear that please understand us, and particularly the values and so on that we've built in our business, you know, as part of a consideration, because we were always very clear that while there's a price, we always felt that, you know, we're a bunch of people. That's all we are. We don't have any gold in the ground. And, you know, the board felt an obligation to make sure that if we were going to be acquired by someone else, that the people in our business are looked after. And I think, you know, we've landed in a very, very good place. You know, the thing I really enjoy about, if you like, a Japanese shareholder is that, you know, they talk about the next 20, 30, 40 years. I was talking to, you know, analysts who would ask me about what do you think trading's going to be like on Friday?
Yep.
So, you know, I'm kind of very comforted by that. You know, I think, you know, Australian business can be kind of proud that, you know, and we've seen this with a lot of Japanese investment, you know, for 40 years, 50 years in this country, you know, heavily involved in the resources and energy sectors, and so on, but more widespread now than ever. That they see Australia as a group of people that they can get along with. They see the lands of the law being relatively stable. They can understand that, and they see the country as having enormous opportunity to not only grow domestically, but to support growth in Asia.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think all those things are true, and that still represents, you know, the opportunity for the next 50 years for businesses in Australia, and particularly in Perth, is to, you know, think seriously about how do you fit in the world, and what are you good at, and then make it a success of that. And you know, the way the world works now, I think that creates more opportunity for Perth-based businesses, not less, because you can access markets you could never access before. You know.
No, I appreciate that. And just something you mentioned there about not, you know, the listed environment and needing to,
Yep.
you know, that short-termism.
Yep.
But I do remember you telling me one day, some time ago, that because you're in that staffing, contracting world, you actually do see things happening in front of you that perhaps are leading indicators.
Yeah, no, we see, let's say labour demand, right? We see that kind of on a weekly basis at a country level, state level, and regional town kind of level. And I always remember, you know, as an example, a couple of years ago, we saw an immediate change in the month of July. This is a couple of years ago, and so when we got to our AGM at the end of July, we kind of made a bit of a comment about that, right? And everyone was kind of going, that can't be right. You know, we were speaking to this retailer or that company, and who have just kind of, you know, put out maybe the full year results and different things and different timelines, and they were saying, no, things are travelling okay, right? And I did say to a number, I said, look, we're just saying how we've seen it, right? It's too early for them to make that call, but I guarantee you by Christmas they will make that call. And we saw it right across the Coca-Cola, Emmetals, the Borrells, and all these other companies that really, you know, feed into the, you know, the
consumer
confidence, and the economy. We saw that straight away. So one of the things that I've been doing is I sit on one of those business advisory committees with the Reserve Bank of Australia, mm-hmm. and I'm often sharing some of that kind of antidote about what we see, both on a labour demand basis, on a national basis, as well as a regional basis, and particularly, you know, when this whole thing about, you know, WA, you know, East versus West, two-speed economy, all those kind of commentary, and you know, I think that you know, my general view was it was, you know, in WA it was never as good as people said it was, and then it was never as bad as people said it was. I think both things were extremes that were over-exaggerated.
Yeah,
and our data would suggest that.
Appreciate that. No, it is unique. You got it. You know, and you're using it for good, not bad, which is great.
We don't buy or sell shares of the companies that we work with.
No, very good. Look, I'm just conscious of time, and I guess there are a couple of things that I'd like to just broach. There's programmed involvement with sport and also your involvement with CEOs for gender equity. So maybe I'll just take that first one.
Yep.
You know, Program obviously has been a big sponsor of Freo, and I was intrigued by that. And then more recently, you've jumped in with the Western Force as well. So you're spreading your...
So I think how we've got involved in that, I mean, certainly when I arrived at Integrated, you know, we were doing a lot of you know, business development, if you like, through football. The different branches of the business would have some boxes at the football and stuff like that. And I guess, you know, we decided that we were going to have a common brand. So it could have been Integrated or Program. In the end, I decided the Program was a kind of a bit more of a unique word, we felt. And, you know, it talks to the idea of, you know, being planned and organised and these sorts of things. So we thought we'll adopt that name. But of course, the challenge with that is that Integrated was really the WA company. Program was a Melbourne-based company, and our research shows almost no one had ever even heard of Program before, particularly in Western Australia. And Western Australia was about, you know, it was at the time about 40% of our revenue. It got up to nearly 48 at the peak of the resources capex boom, if you like. We're back now at about 32, 33, but we've been having some pretty good success over east, so it's, you know, it balances out.
Yep.
So I guess originally, to go at a higher level, if you like, to really, in terms of to get branding and those sorts of things out of it, was really about that initial rebranding of the company as one program, if you like. So rather than, you know, we had Total Marine Services and we ended up having KLM, we had Integrated, we had all these different businesses. So we put it all under program. And, you know, I do think that whilst people can say, well, you know, they see a sign or they see and they don't exactly know what the company does, what we continue to reinforce is what the values of that brand stands for, right? And ultimately, I think that's the ultimate place you need a brand. It's not about what does the company do. It's actually about what does that brand stand for, right? And you know, then, you know, so there is people associated. They see that brand, they know that, and then they, you know, they see that brand associated with a whole range of other community things we do.
Yep.
They see it associated with the CEOs for Gender Equity. They see it associated with the work we do at Rottnest, and you know, we've got a wonderful program with Active Foundation where, you know, we have both men and women who have Down syndrome, and we take them over there. They wear our uniform there. We actually employ them proudly to kind of work to help do work over there. All those kinds of things, and people start actually associating with our organisation and not only what we do, but what we stand for.
Gotcha. And the Western Force is just an extension of that.
Well, I think you know what happens there, of course, is that you know, first I'll say, you know, a key for us, particularly with Fremantle, was the introduction of the AFLW, and we are their main sponsor for the women's team as well. I think with Western Force, you know, we were actually have been a sponsor with them in the past, right? And you know, Andrew Forresters can be very persuasive at times. And I actually do feel that West Australia was absolutely dudded by, you know, the ARU. And so a bit of that thinking that we should support the communities. And we also, you know, our arrangement there is not to be the major sponsor. Our arrangement there is we've done a couple of things which, of course, haven't really kind of been announced, but, you know, we're going to be involved in their Future Force Foundation, which is going to be funding teenagers who wouldn't have the opportunity to play schoolboy rugby at a state level if someone didn't pay for their airfares or do other things. So we've kind of put in that. We are the major sponsor of the women's Western Force team, which, you know, only plays in a domestic competition at the moment. But you know, Andrew's got some pretty big plans about how that can expand as well. And I think it all just comes together that, you know, we just feel like, as a good corporate WA citizen, we're just doing our bit. And looking forward to Friday night, May the 4th, to see Wolf Mother play before the game.
Tomorrow night.
Just giving it a plug.
Fair enough. And talk to me about the CEOs for Gender Equity. We've got some good questions here too. So
yeah. No, look, CEOs for Gender Equity, I mean, and it's one of these things where you start getting involved, you get frustrated that there's not enough actual action happening, and so therefore I take it on myself, and it's become quite a passion of mine in the last few years. It really started when the first WEGA data, you know, the Workplace Gender Equity Agency report came out, And it showed WA was the worst performing state by a country mile. And the then Equal Opportunity Commissioner grabbed a bunch of CEOs that were based here in Perth, you know, from West Farmers and Bank West and a whole range of people to come together, and basically that was actually Yvonne Henderson at the time, and said, all right, you blokes, what are you going to do about it? You know, put the challenge to us, right? And we spent a couple of years kind of meeting, kind of trying to do some things, share some ideas, but you know, the reality is I felt we weren't making much traction. So then myself and a couple of other people said, no, we wanted to do more, and we had to move ourselves out of the Equal Opportunity Commission structure because they are also the regulator, and you know, we felt that no, this is not a government issue. We're going to own this issue, and we're going to see what we can do. So you know, literally a bunch of companies, founding companies, including Program, and we put $30,000 in each. We hired an executive director, Tanya Kikoni, and just built a program, a website, and so on. And we've still got a long way to go, but we do think we've made some progress. I encourage anyone to, if you go into the website, you'll see some, I think, some very good examples of what you and your business can do to drive, you know, not just gender diversity, but diversity in general, and particularly why you should do it, you know. And you know, it's very clear to me that if you've got any team, be it a board or a management team or a project team, diversity of thought is very powerful, right? That's the benefit of diversity in any team, because if you've got diversity of thought, that team will ultimately make a better decision than a group of people who look and think the same. And so, you know, it's not just about gender, but gender is a big part of it.
Well, you've got daughters. Do you think is that part of it for you?
Yeah, it is. I mean, that often comes up. Certainly, I see their lived experience, you know, going through school, the subject selections, when they're at university, you know, literally the outright kind of discrimination and harassment, you know, and things like that go on campuses, to, you know, them now starting their careers in the workforce, you know, and I think the insight that gives me is that, you know, we've still got a long way to go, you know, and I think that, yeah, it gives me insight for sure.
I appreciate that. Well, look, I'm going to open it up for questions, and there was one there about AI, so I'm just going to grab that whilst I start looking around the room for hands. You know, you're in a people business. It's a really interesting question, actually. You're in a people business. What does AI do to that business? What's the upsides and downsides for you?
Look, I think, you know, it's kind of like any threat, there's also an opportunity. I mean, anyone who's ever done a SWOT analysis, you sometimes see that. And certainly, you know, we certainly see that there are things where we provide people working with some of our customers where we think technology might mean that job might not exist, you know. So not, you know, I'm not just talking about AI, I'm talking about, if you like, robotics and that as well. You know, a good example is forklift driving, right?
Yep.
You know, literally in 2006, I mean, we had thousands of forklift drivers working in warehouses and so on. Well, that's just not a job that exists much anymore in you know, in Coles, Woolworths, or any other big retailers. But that said, right, we also see where the new jobs are being created, right? And so, you know, I think from a firm point of view, we've just got to make sure that we're active providing the services where the new jobs are, right? And for instance, you know, we see, you know, I say the care market, which is caring for elderly people in their homes. Maybe it's in the NUS program and things like that. By 2025, there's going to need to be 500,000 more people working in that space than exists today, right? Because we're just all getting older, right? And so we've deliberately last year bought a business that operates directly in that space, based in South Australia. We're now kind of rebooting it. We're setting some scale into the program back office, and we're going to roll that out nationally under the brand Program Cares, you know, in July, August this year. So, you know, that's kind of, we just see it as an opportunity, not a threat.
Yeah, no, okay. There's a question here from the table in the middle.
Yeah.
Sam Walsh.
Sam Walsh. Chris, I'm very interested with your view of the economies in Australia and Western Australia particularly. What's your view of the Western Australian economy? How do you see it motoring?
Yep.
And how do you see the near-term future for us?
Well, certainly I think that whilst there is a bit of a shock to the system as the 3 large CapEx projects come off, and if you were directly involved with a large contract there, you would have less work today, right? But outside that sphere, right, I believe that the WA economy has actually handled it very well, and we're certainly seeing strength in a number of sectors that we work in, and certainly, our belief is that, the next 12 months is definitely an improvement on the past 12 months. And, we see it in resources, we see it in oil and gas, but we also see it in some of the other areas we play in. We see it in education and health, infrastructure. This state is actually quite dynamic. If you think about some of the things we do in infrastructure, we've got involvement in all sorts of assets that have been built across the state that we end up helping maintain or service. There's more public housing being built, there's more schools being built. We're often getting involved in maintaining those assets as well. So from our point of view, I think the next 5-10 years, I think the outlook is actually very good. We understand some of the cyclical nature of the commodity market, but as I've said before, and I've often said to people, it was never that good and it was never that bad. And particularly, I understand the production that the iron ore miners are running at right now. I mean, they're just huge numbers, right? Yeah. And despite what some people from some parts of the union movement and so on might think, it's putting an enormous amount of value back into the local economy and the communities where the workers come from. Down in the southwest, Busselton, where Rio fly out, certainly up around Karratha, there's some dynamism again. I think even Bunbury has become quite a dynamic place now, and we see growth in some of those markets as well. So, no, I reckon if you wanted to start a business, starting one in Perth right now would be a good time. Go and sign yourself a nice cheap CBD lease for the next 5 years. Get the first year rent free, and you're set up.
There you go, you heard it here.
Hi Chris, hi Mark. Jill Hutchison from Leadership West Australia. Chris, you spoke about the importance of having the right people by your side, the values, the diversity of thought. Would you please expand on what your criteria are for the criteria that you look for in a leadership team and for those people that you have by your side?
Yep. Thank you. In terms of people, I do kind of believe that we can take a person and kind of mould them into with the kind of values and so on that we want. So I don't think we kind of screen people out because we think that they haven't got the right values. I think they will screen themselves out, right? In the first 12 months if they don't adjust. Because we do believe that we know how to take a 16-year-old kid and make him into an effective supervisor, but also in a very effective citizen in the community. And what I mean by that is that we focus on 4 things, right? Your own personal safety leadership, right? And what that means is that you don't have to be a leader in the organisational structure sense, but you can be a leader when it comes to safety. On this particular day, to say, hang on, I'm not sure about that. Should we stop that, etc. A big focus on care and empathy, and that's a very core value set for me. I kind of approach every discussion, and I've encouraged everyone else in the organisation to approach every discussion with care and empathy, because I don't believe anyone comes to work wanting to do a bad job. So you've got to sometimes get behind. Well, if someone's not performing as well today as you should, well, why not go and just show some care and empathy rather than think we've got to do some performance management or something, and I think that's been a huge success for program, because I do know that I think a lot of people continue to work for us, and when we've got about 25,000 people working somewhere today, we give 2 or 3 40-year kind of gifts out every year. Probably more than 20 at the kind of 25 and 30 years and so on. And why do people stay? I really do believe because they believe the firm cares for them and the people around them care for them. So that's a very strong set. Just good old-fashioned customer service is another thing we talk about, and then a real commitment around diversity, inclusion and equality. And it's the inclusion piece that becomes really important, right? Because you've got people from different backgrounds and cultures and different things. So how do we make everyone feel like they're part of this family, the program family, right? And that all lines up obviously with care and empathy and other things we do. But that's what we focus on. We talk about it from the day you come into the company. We tell stories about it every week, and I think you immerse yourself in it, and out the other end, maybe a year later, you are showing your own personal safety leadership. You're showing care and empathy, and you're dealing with our customers well.
Now, I'm not seeing another question from the floor. You're very intimidating, Chris. But I think there's a great question here, which I think will probably take us to the end. There's some current ads on telly about, labour hire, and, I don't think that's aimed at your company per se, but...
I feel like it is.
Yeah, right. So how do you respond to that?
We respond firstly with facts, right? So, I think some of the things being said are just not true, right? i.e. the workforce is being increasingly casualised. Well, that's not true. The number of casuals in the total workforce in Australia, which I'm counting here, contractors and sole traders as well, sat at about 20% in 1999 and sits about 20% today. Just has not changed, and we've got graphs going all the way back. Hasn't changed, right? So I think that's, one key aspect. Secondly, this idea that 40% of the workforce are in insecure employment. Well, as I said, we've got people who have worked with us in different ways for 40 years, right? They make us insecure because they tell us when they want to work, when they don't want to work, and all sorts of things, and they've got that personal strength of belief. And I accept, right, that there are people in Australia that probably can't operate and work like that, and there needs to be a safety net, and absolutely strong support of a safety net, right? But I think the idea that 40% basically includes every sole trader, subcontractor, independent contractor, part-time or casual employee.
Yeah.
Like that. Interestingly, about a quarter of all casual employees in Australia, right, are students at university, right? So when you count that number, right, they're not in insecure employment. That's the employment that suits them while they study. And I think that if you try to regulate tighter some of those rules around how that work, I think it doesn't create a great outcome, particularly for young people and particularly for old people.
Yeah.
Because the other thing is this idea about flexibility, right? Flexibility is very important, right? Not only to business, but also I think for a person who wants, if you want to have a successful career, right, but also have a family, then, if we want to increase the participation rate of women, flexibility around being able to go through your job and then maybe work more part-time and do different things for both men and women is increasingly important. And I think that, the arguments around we must change the rules because all those things occur and they're bad is just incorrect.
No, well put, and we look forward to that being put out in the broader market. Well, look, Chris, that's all we've got time for, and so look, I'd like you to just stay here for a moment, and I'd like to welcome Karen Dill-McKay from EY on stage.
Thank you. Good morning. Well, you've given me a lot to talk about. We've covered everything, I think. Mark, thank you very much for your questions and taking us through the life of Chris from his start right the way through to where he is now, the CEO. I think you did a marvellous interview in taking us through that. Thank you to the audience for all your questions. We've covered everything from AI, diversity, the program family, labour hire as well, and the economy. Chris, amazing, always amazing. Chris and I have worked together on many events for gender diversity and also with his role as chair of the CEOs for Gender Equity. Again, he's demonstrated that leading from the top makes such a difference to organisations. He's the sort of person who, if he sees a pothole or something that needs fixing, he does it, and he does it in a sensible way that people follow. And we've heard some amazing things about you. I'm very glad you took your mother's advice about not being a cameraman.
That's right.
We're very happy that that didn't happen. We also heard about his competitiveness with his twin brother, and I think that's a fantastic trait to have as well. I've also looked here at taking risks, and I think that's an amazing thing, but learning from them as well, and we've seen through your history where you've done that and where you've made a difference. And also strategy. I think that was one of the things that I really picked out of it, the fact that you have a strategy and you work it through and you do that for the benefit of your employees and also your community. And that came through with your sponsorship of the Dockers, and I'm a Western Force fan, so I'm very grateful. Thank you. We'd like to present you now with a lovely bottle of wine. I'm not sure where it is, just here. There we go. Thank you, Chris. This is a Rosabrook single vineyard Cabernet Sauvignon from Margaret River, kindly donated by the Kilnigia family vineyards, and I believe this is the wine they're serving from the Perth to London non-stop flight. So enjoy, Chris. And EY is also very glad to be sponsoring this event, so thank you from us as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Karen, and thanks again to Mark and to Chris. Now, before we wrap up, I'd like once again to thank our sponsors. Our host sponsor, Commonwealth Bank of Australia, and our series sponsors, Brian Burke Homes, City of Perth, EY, Harry Perkins Institute, Meerkats, Velrada, WA Super, and the Hyatt Regency. And final task is the door prize. Thank you, Rosemary. If you're the lucky winner, please come and see Rosemary after we finish. And the winner is Justin Boyce Cam from BDO. Well done, Justin. So you can look forward to a night here at the Hyatt in a Regency Club King Room. Now, as you leave, please leave your name tags on the table or at reception. I hope to see many of you at our Rising Stars Awards and at other business news events. And hope you've enjoyed yourself and have a very good day. Thank you.